And the second speaker of the morning is Ron. When I actually designed the timetable, I didn't know that you and Eugenia knew of each other. So that's sort of thank you to someone up there for organising that one. It happened to be more or less because of where you are in the world. Where are you, Ron?
I'm in Hong Kong as well.
You're in Hong Kong as well, so there we
Yeah.
are. Okay, so Ron, on the use of proprioception to convey a meaningful experience in virtual reality. Do tell us more.
Yes, good evening again from Hong Kong. My name is Ron Yakir. I'm with the Academy of Visual Art at HKBU Hong Kong. I'm currently a PhD student at HKBU. And I want to start by talking about something that happened, it seems like a very long time ago. In those days, back when people could, a large group of people could get together in one space and actually share a space within this large space. And in that time at the School of Creative Media, where I met Eugenia, a visiting professor, Ken Weno, who is a choreographer, musician, who is a composer, musician, and educator, was teaching that year, but also organized a performance with Ikue Mori and a group of Hong Kong musicians. The unusual thing about this performance is that the performance took place in a darkened space where the musicians were stationary and the audience would move around and thereby compose their own acoustics of the performance by the choice that they made of where to place themselves. Meanwhile, the musicians all played and improvised together with each other, led by Ken Weno, who also appeared in this. And my attempt then in the topic of the paper, which is the sonic stage, is to see how that experience can be transformed into a digital realm. And the emphasis of my effort, the emphasis of my talk, is about the experience of the spectator, the participant. So the talk is, the story that we're going to talk about is how we get from this to that, how we get from a performance in the world to an experience which is a virtual experience. And in order to do that, we're going to start at the beginning, and the beginning is perception. This example talks about visual perception, but the same model holds true for any kind of sensory perception. The world information is perceived, in this case, by the eyes, and a precept is formed in the brain, and this is what we will we consider as we go forward. But in addition to perception, I wanted to speak about proprioception. Proprioception is sometimes referred to as a sixth sense, and it is that faculty of our body that on the one hand allows us to discern what in the world constitutes our body and where in the space around us that part of our body is. This is an automatic response. This is quick and instinctual, and is the proprioceptive sensors communicate directly with the autonomic nervous system, and this is why most of the time it remains unnoticed. It remains unnoticed unless there are some anomalies. But under normal circumstances, we talk about a sensory feedback cycle. Motor commands from the brain cause our body to move. Sensors send information. This information is the proprioceptive information we just spoke about, the vestibular system in charge of our balance, and the five senses. All of this feedback is then transmitted back into the brain, which adjusts the following the subsequent motor commands. When things go wrong, when a limb is missing, there are all kinds of proprioceptive anomalies that occur. Phantom limb pain is one of these. In the case of amputees, the body image is not automatically adjusted to the absence of the limb. Sometimes the full limb is still maintained as part of the proprioceptive image, sometimes just partially. What we see on the right-hand side of the screen is an attempt to replace those proprioceptive memories that cause the limb pain with new ones. This is an augmented reality system that allows the person to see a digitally generated limb and thereby create new visual memories and these visual memories impact the proprioceptive image and reduce that impact of the pain. Another example is proprioceptive drift. This is actually an experiment, sometimes displayed as a magic trick, whereby the actual limb, as you see here, in this case, the right hand of the subject, is behind the screen. There is a rubber hand, which is placed right next to it, and the visual cues from the brushing the rubber hand is echoed by the sensory cues of an identical brush at the same speed brushing the hand which is hidden from sight. When the rubber hand is threatened, oddly enough, let's say a hammer is poised above it, the instinctive reaction is to withdraw the hand which is not at all threatened, the hand which is out of view. This is caused by a phenomenon known as proprioceptive drift. The visual cues cause a change in the body image, and there is a drift between the physical, actual hand to the visual input of the hand, which is in front of it. So the thesis that I'm developing here starts from perception, and we augment that with the input by the proprioceptive system. We've talked about what happens when there is a limb missing, the phantom limb syndrome, which means that we can perceive a hand which is actually not there, and also proprioceptive drift. The body is intact in this case. All the limbs are present, yet the proprioceptive system dictates a different position for that hand. From there, I'd like to expand towards what this means for the experience of works of art, and then we will talk about the sonic stage, the application of this. Now, in this experiment, subjects were shown two sets of images. The first set is of the famous slash paintings. These are abstract paintings by an Italian artist, Lucio Fontana, where the marks on the canvas are created by the artist actually slashing the canvas with a knife. The control images are images of lines that are present on a space that projects to be the same physical size as the canvas. But of course, since these are just lines, then there are no marks of physical action. In measuring the neural brain activity, the motor neural regions of the brain are activated very differently in the areas where you're looking at the evidence of what actually happened to the canvas in the past, the slashing, as opposed to looking just at the lines. But here we have an instance of actual physical damage to the canvas. Subsequent experiments look at abstract paintings by Franz Kline. These are marks of paint on the canvas. And we see again a very marked difference between the subjects that were exposed to the Franz Kline paintings and the subjects that were exposed to the markings on the canvas. And I'd like to put forward my favorite quote from this research paper. The cortical sensomotor activation is a fundamental neurophysiological demonstration of the direct involvement of the cortical motor system in the perception of static, meaningless images belonging to abstract art. These results support the role of embodied simulation of artist gestures in the perception of works of art. So a couple of important points from that quote. I think that scientists that choose to work with art as their subject matter sometimes display the same level of understanding as some artists who choose to use science as their subject matter. But the important point here is the embodied simulation of artist gestures in the perception of the works of art. This idea that a physicality appears where none is actually present in the world. The idea that the mind responds based on visual stimuli as if events were happening in the world. This is also exemplified in a work more recently, but some of our colleagues at the University of New York, the XRL lab there, the work of Daniel Eckhoff and colleagues in this experiment. This is also in augmented reality, but in this experiment, the viewer is looking at their hand through the augmented reality glasses, and the hand appears to be on fire. This is a very accurate description. The fire imaging on the hand is very accurate. It moves with the hand. It sways as one moves the hand about. The interesting thing is that a certain percentage of the people who have experienced this have also reported a sensation of their hand getting warmer as they look at this simulation. This was actually supported by measuring the conductivity of the skin between subjects, the conductivity of the skin of the hands of subjects that were witnessing their hands ablaze in augmented reality. And those people who reported a sensation of the hand feeling warmer were also the people that objectively show higher conductance of the skin, meaning an increase of sweating in the hand. Again, we have something which is a visual image that has a physical impact on the body outside of the visual. How does this all connect to the sonic stage? The sonic stage was intended to replicate the experience of the actual concert. And what I emphasize here is the replication of the experience. This is not a rendering of the concert stage and the musicians that played there. The experience is created by donning a pair of glasses. We have very low tech here. This is, we're using Unity, and we're using a phone inside a Google Cardboard viewer. So very minimalistic kinds of technology. There is a joystick strapped to the knee, and the viewer is sitting on a revolving stool, allowing them to very comfortably rotate in the space physically, as well as the rotation of their head. What they see as they enter the space by slowly descending into a darkened dome. The floor of the dome appears to be covered in sand. And what the participant will notice on the dome is a red ball, which is very much like the red ball they remember holding in their hand before they donned the glasses. This is the control. By moving the ball in their hand forward, there is a corresponding movement of the ball in the sand. Looking around the space, one would spot 4 rocks in the distance at the cardinal corners of this dome. These 4 rocks represent visual targets, and they are also sound sources. In this initial testing of this, what we used is a Schubert string quartet. So actually, each one of the sound from each one of the musicians is emanating sonically, binaurally from each one of those rocks, while and moving towards them changes the acoustic composition of the experience. So while standing in the middle, your sensation is as if you're standing in the midst of this quartet. And by moving in one direction or the other, you will get to see the solo of the cello or the solo of the second violin, and you get to explore this piece in many different ways. Again, this is just an initial testing of the experience. What this experience exemplifies is a kind of a digital representation. And since my interest is in the experience of the user, I look at digital representations, and I have attempted to divide them into 3 kinds of digital representations. The first I would call virtualizing the physical. This is when there is a virtual simulation that looks and behaves and appears for all intents and purposes like a physical space. Google Arts and Culture, in their infinite resources, can create something called Meet Vermeer. There are 36 paintings by Vermeer existing today in the world, and they are on 7 different in 7 different countries, 18 museums. Never once have all 36 of them been shown together, except in the Google Museum. Navigating the Google Museum, you advance in the space as you would walk through a museum. You go from room to room, you walk on the floor, and you can get up close to the paintings and see it in infinite detail. So you are virtualizing the physical world and moving in it by navigating it. The second category would be called physicalizing the digitized. Pure Land 360, a well-known work by Jeffrey Shaw, also of the School of Creative Media, is a digitization of the Donhuang Buddhist Grotto Temple, and it is created in a life-size environment, and you can walk around the digitized environment and explore it, akin somehow to the plastic version of Lascaux 2 in France. But this is a digitized version, but you explore it physically in the world, in the real world, in the same way that you would be walking around the caves. The area that is interest of me is the idea of physicalizing the digital. This is a physical navigation within a world which is clearly digital. One example is, or many examples that are in the work of TeamLab. You get to walk within a physical space, but there is no attempt made to create an illusion that you're walking within some kind of a real space, as in the Vermeer Museum. Nobody would look at the colorful butterflies on the wall and mistake them for clear butterflies. But the exploration is nevertheless a wonderful thing, and is part of a digital space that you walk around physically. I think that some of the wonderful presentations that we had yesterday may also fall into this category. I think of things like Yoen's Yomichi, where you are exploring a world which is patently digital. I also think of Moshe Kane's New Jerusalem, the idea of point clouds, of areas of religious significance, but the idea which he spoke of eloquently yesterday of manifesting them as point clouds is exactly putting front and forward the abstractness of the digital space and thereby leaving a different kind of an emotional reaction. And this is the area that I'm interested to explore. The term that I think is appropriate for these phenomena that we just spoke of, this idea of proprioceptive drift, the idea of an integration of visual cues into the idea of integrating visual cues into a mindset where there are physical-like reactions is the area that I intend to explore in the future, and this is the category that I would name phantom physicality. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron. It's fascinating talk, and is anyone, we're a little tight on time, but has anyone got any questions they'd like to ask him straight away now? If not, if you think of anything, just type it in to the Q&A and Ron can see it and he can type you an answer from that. But thank you very much indeed. I found that quite fascinating, and it's really interesting to read a paper that someone's written and then see when it's described that how that works. It's lovely to have done that. Okay, thank you. We'll move now to our third speaker of the morning, Xua Zhu, who is in China.